The Short Season Under Satan by the Truth Harmonist, as originally posted on X at Love is Truth. This ebook is and will forever be offered free of charge. It is not intended for sale under any circumstances. If you find value in the information presented within this ebook, please consider sharing it and following the main social media account on the X platform. The Truth Harmonist at love, LUV_is_truth. Additionally, a secondary account with the same handle has been created on Truth Social for members of that platform. Please note that there will never be any requests for donations of any kind. Anyone who solicits donations or claims association with or belonging to At Love is Truth is not genuine. As having received free, this account will always give free. Are we still waiting for the Great or 7-Year Tribulation? The majority of Christians today are awaiting the second coming of Jesus. While some await a rapture, others anticipate a significant 7-year tribulation period. This is due to the interpretation of the prophecy found in Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 to 27. Many consider it as a roadmap leading to the second coming of Christ. This prophecy is viewed as yet to be fulfilled, with believers eagerly awaiting the fulfillment of these events in the return of our Savior. But what if these events already took place, and the scriptures themselves reveal that to us? Daniel's Messianic Prophecy. In the midst of the Babylonian exile, Daniel, a devout servant of God, fervently prayed, understanding that the prophesied 70 years of captivity were nearing completion. Daniel sought God's mercy and guidance as the appointed time for the restoration of Jerusalem and the return of the Israelites to their land approached. After his prayer, Gabriel, a divine messenger of God, shared with Daniel important knowledge regarding the restoration of the Temple of Jerusalem up until the establishment of the Messianic kingdom. He explains that it will be 70 weeks from the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem to the establishment of the Messianic kingdom. Daniel chapter 9, verse 24, 490 years until the establishment of righteousness. Quote, 70 weeks are decreed for your people and your holy city to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. End of quote. 70 weeks are decreed for your people and your holy city. Daniel's prayer was related to the 70 years of his people's Babylonian captivity. Gabriel responded by speaking of 70 weeks. Therefore, he was speaking of 70 years of weeks. That would be 490 years. 70 years times 7 equals 490 years. To finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness. These phrases express the ultimate goals of the prophecy, including the resolution of sin and the establishment of righteousness through divine intervention. To seal both vision and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place. The Hebrew words used here for most holy place are Kodesh, Kodeshim, which literally translates to Holy of Holies or Most Holy. Israel's temple played a central role in their worship. Israel was a nation that God entered a covenant with to produce the Messiah, and when they fulfilled their legal obligation of obedience, they benefited from his guidance, protection, and his presence. God's presence was in the inner sanctuary, the holiest part of the temple, the Holy of Holies. Therefore, when the establishment of the Messianic kingdom was to take place on earth, it's where the new most holy place, or Holy of Holies, would naturally be located. But rather limited to a small nation, this time it would be at the center of all of righteous humanity. Gabriel then goes on to explain what is to take place within those 70 years. Daniel chapter 9, verse 25. Messiah's death and the rebuilding of Jerusalem. Quote, "Know and understand this, from the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 70 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be rebuilt with streets and a trench, but in times of trouble." End of quote. From the going forth of the word to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. This marks the starting point of the prophecy, which historically corresponds to the decree issued by King Cyrus of Persia, allowing the Jews to rebuild Jerusalem. Until Messiah the Prince there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. This time frame represents a total 483 years from the decree to rebuild Jerusalem until the Messiah. This does not include the last week, or 7 years. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. This refers to the rebuilding of Jerusalem's infrastructure, which would occur under difficult circumstances during the restoration period. Daniel chapter 9, verse 26, Messiah's death and tribulation. Quote, "After the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be put to death and will have nothing. The people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary, and its end will come like a flood. War will continue until the end, and desolations have been decreed." End of quote. After the 62 weeks, the Anointed One will be put to death and will have nothing. After the rebuilding of Jerusalem, there would be 62 weeks, or 434 years, until the Messiah's death. He will have nothing in the sense that he has yet to establish his rule over the earth. The people of the ruler who will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. This is referring to the city of Jerusalem, where the temple was located. The sanctuary was the innermost chamber of the temple, known as the Holy of Holies. This was the most sacred space where the Ark of the Covenant was kept, as well as the dwelling place of God's presence among his people, as mentioned above. Access to the Holy of Holies was highly restricted and reserved for specific rituals performed by the high priest on behalf of the people. By the time of Jesus, Satan had managed to gain control of the majority of the world's governing and likely religious elements. That is why Jesus refers to him as the ruler, or prince of this world, in John chapter 12, verse 31, John chapter 14, verse 30, and John chapter 16, verse 11. As such, Satan is the one who has the city and the sanctuary destroyed, signifying the end of God's presence and rule, and the establishment of his own. In biblical times, it was common for conquering kings to overthrow the kingdoms they defeated and destroy or subjugate their cities. The destruction of the city and sanctuary likely signified a takeover and the establishment of an inverted form of godly worship. And its end will come like a flood. War will continue until the end, and desolations have been decreed. The Hebrew word for end used in this verse is ketz. This word suggests a decisive conclusion or termination, akin to the overwhelming force of a flood that brings destruction. This verse is telling us of the termination or downfall of the ruler's authority or rulership. However, until that end comes, wars and great devastation is prophesied to happen as a result of the people of the ruler. Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, 7 years until desolation of Satan's rule. Quote, "And he will confirm a covenant with the many for 1 week, but in the middle of the 1 week he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, and on the wing of abominations will come the one who makes desolate, until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate." End of quote. And he will confirm a covenant with the many for 1 week. Linguistically, in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, it appears that the covenant is made by he, the ruler, with many, the people. This suggests a direct association between the ruler's actions and both the covenant making and the ceasing of religious practices. In mimicking God's practice of establishing covenants with his people in the past, Satan also establishes a covenant with the people. He does so for the entire duration of the final 7 years, for the purpose of fulfilling Satan's will. But in the middle of the 1 week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. As these events commence at the death of the Messiah, it is at the middle of the remaining week that the ruler will destroy the city and the sanctuary, the center of worship for God's people. The destruction of Jerusalem took place shortly after the death of Jesus, 3.5 years later. This would coincide with the understanding that once Jesus was appointed king in the heavens, war would have broken out in heaven. Satan was then hurled down to earth with great rage, knowing his time was short. History has told us that Jerusalem was destroyed well after the death of Jesus. According to whom? Particularly the historical records of the Jewish historian Flavius Josephus in his work, The Jewish War. According to Josephus and other historical sources, the Roman army, led by Titus, besieged and ultimately captured Jerusalem in 70 A.D., resulting in the destruction of the city and its holy temple. It is claimed that historical evidence, along with archaeological findings, support the understanding that Jerusalem suffered a devastating destruction in 70 AD. However, the following threads will prove that this history was completely falsified to hide the fact that the Messianic kingdom was established 7 years after the death of the Messiah. In doing so, he defeated Satan's attempt to establish his rule on earth. Would that not be the first part of history that Satan would want erased as soon as his rule, this time an uninterrupted one, took place in the short season? On the wing of abominations will come the one who makes desolate, until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate. In biblical prophecy, particularly in the book of Daniel, abominations often refer to acts or practices that are offensive to God. On the wing could imply the swift or sudden arrival of these abominations, suggesting a rapid and overwhelming onslaught of evil or corruption. This corresponds with the warnings of Jesus when he makes reference to Daniel chapter 9 verse 27 in the New Testament, while warning his disciples of the upcoming great tribulation. Jesus speaks of the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place in Matthew chapter 24 verse 15, Mark chapter 13 verse 14, and Luke chapter 21 verse 20. The term standing implies a presence or manifestation of something unholy within the temple precincts, the ruler's attempt to establish himself as divine and the supreme authority. Even so, Gabriel ensures that the ruler does not rule for long. Satan's rulership is short-lived, destined to end in complete destruction. This final defeat occurred when Jesus, in a decisive victory, defeated Satan and his forces in a climactic battle, banishing Satan into the abyss. The Church Age. It is a common belief that there is an interruption that took place between the 69 weeks and 1 week. This is commonly referred to as the Church Age, the period of time many believe we are in today. This interpretation is based on passages such as Matthew chapter 16, verse 18, where Jesus tells Peter, quote, "And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." End of quote. Additionally, the letters written to the churches in the New Testament, particularly in the book of Revelation, are seen as addressing issues relevant to the church age. The idea of the church age is that it emphasizes the role of the church in spreading the message of salvation and preparing believers for the return of Christ. It is important to note when examining the Greek of Matthew chapter 16, verse 18, the word church is translated from the Greek word ekklesia. This word means a gathering of people or an assembly of people. These are the ones that Peter was asked to take care of, who Jesus referred to as his little sheep. In John chapter 21, verses 15 to 17, Jesus asked Peter 3 times if he loves him, and each time Peter responds affirmatively. After each affirmation, Jesus instructs Peter to feed my lambs, take care of my sheep, and feed my sheep, symbolizing Peter's role as a shepherd and leader among Christ's followers. Here, Jesus is emphasizing the importance of protecting and caring for his followers. Why is this important? Because of the period of tribulation they would be facing shortly after Jesus' death. Peter was to be the rock of the people, caring for them through the most tumultuous time in history. Is the idea of the tribulation taking place at that time supported by Scripture? The statue of Daniel. The statue in the book of Daniel, found in Daniel chapter 2, verses 31 to 45, is a vision given to the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. In this vision, Nebuchadnezzar sees a towering statue made of different materials, each representing a successive world empire. Here's a breakdown of the components of the statue and their symbolic meaning. Head of gold. This represents the Babylonian Empire, specifically Nebuchadnezzar's reign, which was known for its wealth, power, and grandeur. Chest and arms of silver. This represents the succeeding empire, historically interpreted as the Medo-Persian Empire, which conquered Babylon and ruled over a vast territory. Belly and thighs of bronze. This represents the next empire, often understood as the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great and his successors. The Greeks were known for their military prowess and expansion. Legs of iron. These symbolize the Fourth Empire, commonly identified as the Roman Empire. The iron legs represented the strength and durability of Rome's military might and political dominance. Feet of iron and clay. The final part of the statue, the feet and toes made of a mixture of iron and clay, symbolize a divided kingdom or a period of fragmentation and weakness. By the days of Jesus, the final part of the statue, feet of iron and clay, was already being realized. The Roman Empire was already in decline, with scriptural evidence to support that claim. Rome, already in decline. There are several pieces of evidence from the New Testament that suggest Rome was already in a state of decline during Jesus' time. These factors help us see that Rome's influence and control over its territories during Jesus' ministry were not as firm and centralized as it was in earlier periods of the empire. Rome's allowance of self-governance. Rome granted a significant degree of autonomy to local authorities, including religious leaders and regional governments. For example, the Jewish Sanhedrin had considerable authority in matters of Jewish law and governance, including the ability to administer justice within the Jewish community. Herod's rule. Herod the Great, who ruled over Judea during Jesus' birth, was appointed by Rome, exercising substantial authority over the region. However, Herod's rule was marked by instability and cruelty. This suggests a weakening grip of Roman authority, likely due to challenges to Roman control and difficulties in maintaining order within the territories under Roman governance. Pilate's governance. Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea during Jesus' death, demonstrated a degree of reluctance to assert Roman authority in local religious matters. He deferred to the Jewish leaders and crowd pressure in the trial of Jesus, indicating a lack of firm control over local affairs. Political fragmentation. The Roman Empire was characterized by internal political divisions and power struggles. This fragmentation weakened centralized control and contributed to instability within the empire. Destruction of the statue. Daniel chapter 2, verses 44 and 45 tells us what happens to the statue. Quote, "In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of the mountain, but not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. End of quote. It is in the days of the kingdoms of the statue that God puts an end to the rule of all other kingdoms. God's kingdom will never be passed down to another person, as it was never intended for us to be governed by humans. Rather, authority is given to the Son of Man, as shown in Daniel chapter 7. Preceding the anointing of the Son of Man, Daniel chapter 7 describes Daniel's dream of 4 beasts. These beasts correspond to the statue in Daniel chapter 2, as well as the establishment of God's kingdom, including when it is established. The beasts of Daniel. In the book of Daniel, the beasts symbolize successive world empires and their rulers, each with its own characteristics and significance. These beasts, or world empires, correspond with the world empires of the statue in Daniel chapter 2. In Daniel chapter 7, verses 7 and 8, Rome is depicted as a terrifying and dreadful beast having iron teeth and 10 horns. The 10 horns likely symbolize divisions or rulers within the empire, the clay and the iron. In Daniel chapter 7, verses 9 to 14, it speaks of the destruction of the beasts due to divine judgment. This is followed by the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. For a better understanding of the significance of the title Son of Man, please see the post Jesus' Role in Dominion, found under Highlights on the X account. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 14, the Son of Man is given, quote, authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. End of quote. The establishment of the Messianic kingdom takes place after the destruction of the last beast, Rome. This takes place during its declining stage, the time of the iron and clay mixture of the statue, which was already taking place in Jesus' day. This also aligns with the beast of Revelation chapter 13, described as having a fatal wound on its head, symbolizing the period of decline of the Roman Empire. It only regained its resurgence due to the authority given to it by the dragon during its short time of rulership during the Great Tribulation, only to be brought to its end by Jesus. The short season of Satan. Therefore, we can see that the period of time we are living in is not the church age. Jesus established his kingdom 1 week or 7 years after his death. The following threads will examine the evidence that proves that Jesus did, in fact, establish his kingdom here on earth during that time, and the evidence that proves that we have been living in the short season of deception under Satan.